Okay, welcome to a new module for BIO100. So here in this module, we're going to be focusing on science communication. So this is a little bit different than what we've been doing in the past, but I'll explain throughout the module why this is important and why this is an important skill for you to have and why we think it's worthwhile to have in the curriculum here for BIO100. So thinking broadly in terms of what some of the course goals are, the course student learning outcomes for BIO100, at the end of the semester, we want you as students to be able to read a scientific paper and explain the significance of the research. And so when we think about explaining the significance, that can be to two different types of audiences, and we've talked mostly so far about communicating to a scientific audience when you wrote your results, narratives, and figure captions, for instance. But it's also really important to be able to talk about the significance of research to the general public and the lay audience as well. And that's what we'll be focusing on in this module. And another main goal of this course is we want you to be able to recognize evidence-based conclusions and form reasoned opinions about science-related matters of personal, public, and ethical concern. And so what we're going to do today is focus on, in particular, a very relevant scientific issue that has much broader implications. And so we'll introduce that in a little bit. And so if we look back on this overall concept map for the course, again, the central thing here is scientific data. If we go down to this area down here, when we communicate our data, again, we can do that to a scientific audience or to the lay audience or the public. And this is what we'll be focusing on in this module. And so we've already talked about this a little bit if you think about when you were doing the work for the analysis of scientific literature, you were asked to write two different types of summaries, one type of summary for a scientific audience and one type of summary for a lay audience or a public audience. And I'm going to ask you in a little bit to complete a quiz that will ask you to think about, again, how those two things were different. But if we use this example here, so this is an example that we've also already looked at when we were finding the main points of papers. This was an excerpt for one of the finding main points quizzes. And so the goal here and what we're communicating is the difference between when you're talking to a lay audience or the public versus a scientific audience. And so here on the left, what I'm showing is a headline from a Washington Post article. And the headline says, "Dogs may have evolved puppy dog eyes," shown here, "to tug at our hearts." And this is an actual image shown here from that article. This puppy's adorable. I want to cuddle it and pet it. And so if you think about what kind of emotions or what kind of effect this headline has on you, it's really emotional, right? So it says it tugs at your hearts. It's very subjective. If we compare that to this, which is the heading or the title of the actual scientific paper that was published in PNAS, which is the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, the title for that paper is very different. The title is Evolution of Facial Muscle Anatomy in Dogs. And so here that's much more concise and objective because that's the goal of scientific papers. And then if you compare the image that's shown here, this is one of the figures from the paper where they're showing the different types of muscles that are found in dogs versus wolves. Here are those special types of muscles that are found in dogs that allow them to have those puppy dog eyes that are missing in wolves. But the main point here is that depending on what type of audience you are targeting, you have very different strategies in terms of your communication and what types of words and what types of emotions you're trying to convey to your reader. Another distinction when we're thinking about science communication is whether you're doing that either in a written form or an oral form. Again, we've talked mostly so far about written form. So this is one example. If you are trying to convey your results in a written form in the scientific world, often you're writing that up as a scientific paper. So this is the paper that we wrote the missing abstract for and then also analyzed when we talked about analyzing scientific literature. So when it's in a written form, generally it's in the form of a publication. versus an oral form, that's when you're talking to an audience. So, and that audience can again be either someone who's more scientific, so this is an awkward still image of me giving a talk at Chico, or you can be communicating orally to the general public, which is what's shown here on the right. So when we're communicating orally, we want to be able to do that not only with scientists, but also with the general public. And if we're doing oral communication, also we want to think about being able to target our message not only to adults, but also to children, right? So when we're communicating orally, it gives us an opportunity to reach a broader audience than you might get just from talking to professors or other scientists. And this skill of being able to communicate orally is so important, and we think it's valuable for you here in BIO100 because this is something that employers really want their employees to have. So in a poll of 125 businesses, employers stated that they wanted their new hires to be able to effectively communicate orally. They wanted them to be able to work effectively with others in teams. So that's also something we're doing in the structure of BIO100 when you come and have your in-class portions. And they want you to be able to apply knowledge and skills to real-world settings. Again, the topic we're going to address today is very much something that's happening here in the real world. And so if maybe you've been thinking that when we're writing about scientific results, if maybe that doesn't apply to the particular career you want. I know some of you have spoken to me or written on your exit surveys that you want to go into teaching, and so you're not sure if you're ever going to be writing a scientific paper or anything like that. But basically any career you go into is going to involve some kind of oral communication, so that's also a really important skill for you to be able to develop. And so if we look specifically at the learning outcomes for this particular module, at the end of this module, we want you to be able to determine appropriate communication strategies for a lay audience versus a scientific audience. We want you to be able to explain how climate change is affecting us. So this is that topic I was talking about of personal, public, and ethical concern. We're going to focus on climate change in this module. We want you to be able to use metaphors and solutions to communicate the causes of climate change and what we can do about it. And then lastly, we want you to be able to create a conversation script using the science of framing, and we'll have videos on that, so we'll explain that thoroughly later on in the module, that you can use to convey climate change to others. And so just like with all of my modules, before we really get into it, first I want to have you activate your prior knowledge. So think about what we've done in previous weeks that is related to what we're doing now, how anything you already know about climate change, for instance. And so the benefits of this are helping you get context for new information you're about to learn, and then giving you connections to help store this new material in your long-term memory. Again, this is the goal here. We want you to be able to remember this material days, months, even years from now. Sometimes at the end of the semester, I ask my students, 5 years from now, what are you going to remember about this course? And so hopefully some of the things you're learning here in BIO100, you're going to remember for the long term. At least that's our goal. And so by having you activate this prior knowledge, hopefully we can help you be able to do that. So go ahead and go to Canvas and complete that prior knowledge quiz, and I'll see you back in a little bit for the next video.